So, hi, Action Coach community. Today we have Mr. Andrew Rhatigan from Rhatigan Real Estate. Andrew, great to see you. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you, Tom, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, as you can see, we've all got the makeup on. We're ready to go with this interview here today. So, Andrew, can you tell our listeners here today, what do you do and how long have you been doing it?
Well, essentially, in my current form, I'm a real estate agent, and I've created a bespoke independent agency that specializes in helping people buy property as well as selling property. And I've tried to bring my personality and my expertise into it. And I started that about 2 years ago now.
Excellent, excellent. And what do you think it is that makes you a little bit different to maybe some of the competitors out there?
I think one of the things I embraced when I started my business was I'm trying not to be everyone's cup of tea. And I think oftentimes in business, we feel we need to please a broader range of people to get desired results. And what I learned quite quickly was if you're the everyman, you don't really stand out. So what I found was the kind of service I give is very hands-on, it's very bespoke, and it's also extremely involved. So I don't tell people what they want to hear for the sake of it. And I noticed that that resonated with my clients. And as I refined my offering, I realized the more I niched down what I do and who I serve, the more it was easier for the likes of Tom in the pub or at a coffee to tell someone else what it was I did, as opposed to, I think Andrew's in property, something like that. It made more, Andrew does this, Andrew does that, and I kind of set out my kind of specialization in that way.
And again, your history and the family and all have been involved in property for many, many years. So you'd be well known throughout the circle, and you've also worked in other estate agents as well for a period of time.
Yes, I did. Well, I suppose growing up, I think I had more plasterers at the kitchen table than I did family members a lot of the time. And I always really enjoyed it. And I think I got that entrepreneurial element of my attitude from my father and my uncles, because I think they obviously have to think on their feet. It's a very challenging environment to be in. And I suppose there's no way of not absorbing that kind of information when you're surrounded by it. And then obviously I learned the basics of property from them. And then I obviously honed that working with an agent, Janet Carroll. It was a fabulous operation. I really enjoyed every minute of working with her.
Fantastic. So tell me, the big C, COVID came along. So what were the one or two actions that you took or changed due to the pandemic?
I think the biggest thing that I did was actually start my own business. We were in the height of lockdown and we were expecting my second daughter, who's now just over 18 months old.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. A beautiful girl. So I'm now outnumbered by girls. So I definitely know my place at this point. Smile politely is first and then apologize is second, whether you've done anything wrong or not. And at the time, I probably said to myself, what part of where do I see my life going? So it gave me, I think when we're all busy all the time, it's very easy to be running around, action oriented, but very, very seldom reflective on what it is you want to do going forward, because you oftentimes don't get the time to really look at that. And I decided, what part of my life do I want to start taking more control over and how do I see it progressing? And it was purely personal idea to say, well, what if I took who I am and I created a business around who I am and how I do things? And it was then the action I took from that. So that was probably the first big one. And then the second one was probably embracing my way of doing things and being willing to wait for it to resonate with other people while still being proactive. That was probably two.
And presumably then you had to, like everybody else, go into the online virtual world and a lot more meetings that way because you couldn't meet people for a cup of coffee and stuff. But I'm sure you're currently doing a mixture of both.
Yes, well, I think property is one of those unusual areas of the market where you're in people's most private space all the time. So from the get-go, any agent is usually within someone's private dwelling, or they know kind of the insider knowledge that the general public may not know. And I saw two trains of thought. I saw some people that were terrified of COVID and didn't want to see anybody. And I saw people who had alternative opinions. But regardless, as an estate agent, because you're in people's personal space, you have to adapt accordingly to what their level of comfort is. So some people it was standing outside their house, 20 feet apart, trying to have a discussion about what they hope to achieve. And for others, it was email, or the advent of Zoom made a big difference to be able to connect with people as well.
But it offered us, COVID brought change, accelerated change. So I think it's actually created a much more exciting world. And if we haven't changed, then you're in trouble. So most of us haven't changed and adapted. So tell me, what is the biggest learning then in the last few years that you've had since you became a business owner, Andrew?
Far and away, what I've learned is actually the approach I take to anything when it goes wrong. I think what I used to do as a business owner when I was younger, firstly, I was starting with an idea that I hoped would work so I could then have the freedom I wanted to live the life I wanted, which oftentimes you say, well, when I make money, I will then do X, which obviously you have the audacity to assume you're going to be alive long enough for that to happen. So what I realized creating this business was it's in line with my personality and my skill sets, but the view I took to everything was curiosity. So if something went wrong, I took a step back and I was curious about how it happened, where it could go, and how I could apply and learn from it going forward, as opposed to being reactive and saying, oh my God, this has happened or someone's upset. And a big part of that was it took the pressure off my interaction with people. So I was approaching it from a kind of a helicopter view of, okay, this is happening. How do we strategically manage this now? How do we learn from it? And how do we apply that going forward? And that was a huge part of it for me. And it frees you up to realize that we all take things very seriously. But sometimes if you take a step back, it actually gives you a better viewpoint than if you just try and tackle it in the heat of the moment.
Excellent. And again, you mentioned there growing up at the time. So looking back or looking forward now, is this what you always wanted to do?
I think if I looked at a trend from when I was growing up, I always loved people. I always loved interaction, and I always loved being able to make a difference in other people's lives, whether that was a service I was providing, a product I was, imparting on people. Even when I was younger and I wanted to buy my first car, I cut grass. And I still remember that even my interactions with people, if it was someone who was a little bit older and I noticed something else needed to be done, it would be done without telling them, and then they'd be left with that good feeling. And I suppose as my experience has grown over my life, I've realized that my skill set is people, it's my empathy. And I've then applied my sales technique and my sales knowledge to it and property, and then basically created the ideal format that I like to work in. But that's all based on lots of mistakes, lots of learnings, some wins as well along the way, which is great. But
Yeah, well, that's normal. You know, life isn't about perfect, unfortunately. But I mean, if we're learning from our mistakes and moving forward, people will actually admire you for that, saying, look, made a mess here. We're going to correct it by doing the following. But as long as it is addressed, you don't hide from the damn thing.
Exactly.
So tell me, what would you reckon the biggest issues that you've actually overcome in the last couple of years?
I think the biggest element has been building a business without using a huge budget. I think what I've done is I went back to basics. So instead of either taking out a large loan or using a large sum of money to create this brand awareness, I suppose in my business in Ireland in property, it's very contentious, it's very competitive, and you have a number of brands that have market share and the ability to consistently provide that branding. What I really did was I went back to basics. So to overcome that, I basically took the eye of, I'm going to be patient, I'm going to apply the curiosity, but almost like the grassroots politician, I said, well, who can I connect with, build those relationships as I go forward, and then that then germinates into a larger network. And the great thing was it meant meeting really lovely people, having coffee with no outcome, and then over time it naturally became, oh, Andrew's in my ecosystem, he's the type of character I like, I know so much of that.
So in other words, networking, but networking properly.
Networking with a purpose, as opposed to a
even better.
Yeah, exactly.
Even better. Absolutely. So I need to ask you, because the business I'm in, who's the best coach you ever had? Was it a parent? Was it a friend? Was it an outside mentor? You don't have to mention any names, but have you ever taken advice from a mentor, or who would you regard as having been your coach?
I do actually have a mentor, and I think one of the biggest things I found is it's actually quite like almost like therapy or dating. You have to find the right person that is aligned with who you are in your personality and your characteristics, but also has that external ability to look at what it is you're saying to them and provide either solutions or questions that provide you with the solutions through that kind of interrogation or self-reflection. And I think for a lot of people, they probably don't see as much the value that can really be gotten from outsourcing that and paying for someone to do that. Because two things, when something's free, you don't often appreciate it. So if you have a family member, even if they're extremely successful, you take it for granted because they're always there and you don't have to pay anything for it. But the best thing I ever did was invest in someone outside of myself, outside of my family, and I'm accountable to them, they're accountable to me, but it means that I have a separate area of my life that I can work on and then kind of learn as I go after I've had those interactions as well. It's been invaluable.
Fantastic. Did you ever think of becoming a coach yourself?
You never know. If property goes south, there could be a dovetail between Rhatigan Property and Rhatigan Consulting.
Well, the way you put that across, I think, was absolutely fantastic. So tell me, what does the future look like in the immediate future, 5 to 10 years, and what do you think the biggest challenges you face would be?
I think property is an unusual market in Ireland at the best of times. I think we're going through changes in a number of ways, even how people buy, a lot of people internationally post-COVID. But as the dust settles going forward, I think it's about, I suppose, aside from the supply and demand questions that are involved around property, for me, it's about how can I scale the type of business I have while still providing the same type of value I do. So a big part of what I do is me. And I'm very mindful that I have a unique personality where I will listen to people and hear different things than someone else might. So a big part of my job, and I suppose my fulfillment end of my business, is how am I going to scale it going forward in a way
Yes.
that I still enjoy it rather than feeling like I'm selling out for the sake of it. So that's a big part
Okay.
of what I'm looking at.
Okay, interesting. So you're obviously very old, but what would you say to somebody thinking of going into business for themselves?
I think we need to embrace failure more in Ireland. I think the biggest thing I would say to anybody is, this goes back to, I suppose, both my parents passed at a young age. And I think one of the things that I'm quite mindful of is we all assume we have time later on to do whatever it is we want to do. If someone is thinking of starting a business, my opinion is you're going to make mistakes, you're going to win or you're going to learn. And it's about dusting yourself off and surrounding yourself with the right people who really encourage you and invigorate you to keep going when you need to keep going, but also just draw a line under something and start again. And I think everyone's version of winning is different. And one of the biggest things I've found with people is, much like property, someone wants more money, someone might want a better experience, or someone is going through a difficult time and all they want is an outlet. As a business owner, you have to acknowledge what it is you want. Are you building to sell and make lots of money and hate the process? Or are you going to start a local independent shop, but you're going to provide value to your community and to yourself? And I think by embracing who you really are, building something and being willing to let it go wrong and keep going is probably the one thing I would say to anybody. But also do it. I mean, if you're 70 and you wish you had done something, I think it's the biggest cancer to people is regret.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, you're so eloquent, you put that across so well. But I think the most important part of it is, you got to have focus. But you asked the question that what is success? Like, that's part of what, as a coach, I would ask people. And everybody struggles with what is success. They think they know what it is, but they've never actually written it down and had somebody query them on it. And I struggled with it myself when I was asked the first time, like, what is success? It's a really hard question for people because there's no set answer, because we're all different what we see success as, but that's really good there. So tell me, if you started your business again, would you do anything differently?
Would I do anything differently? I think from a practical standpoint, you could always change things. I think I probably stalled on certain things like my website, where I spent time agonizing over it, as opposed to just getting up and getting out there. I suppose from a practical, reflective standpoint, that's something I could have looked at. But overall, I think it's probably the fact that I've done certain businesses before and my age, I'm now 37, that I took a more,
I'm
getting old now, getting the bus pass soon. But I suppose it taught me to really take that more open approach to how I do things and not be as concerned about what other people think.
Okay.
But yeah, I suppose we could always improve as we go.
Yeah, so I may have skipped a question, but I didn't ask you at the very beginning. So can you describe to our listeners in the Action Coach community here, who would an ideal customer be for Andrew Rhatigan?
So my clients tend to be busy executives, managers, business owners, C-suite executives, and also obviously international households that are either looking to buy or sell property in Ireland. And on the buy side, they basically require someone they can outsource their stress, time, and all the requirements to. And on the sell side, it's someone who needs that kind of, they're very results driven, but the results to each person is different.
Okay, excellent. And how would people get in contact with you there? Does it go directly to your website? And what website is that for our listeners?
Yep. So my website is rre.ie, which is the shortened form of Rhatigan Real Estate, and you'll get all the contact details there. But I'm also on Instagram at Rhatigan Loves Property and on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. So guys, write that down and make sure you contact Andrew if you have any queries. And I presume you'd be okay for people just to ring you for an informal chat initially, just to get to know you and to maybe perhaps link in with you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And anyone who's based nationally in Dublin is more than welcome to have a coffee as well.
Well, now there's an offer you can't refuse, guys. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Really pleasant enjoying you. I could talk for another hour or two. You might find me boring, but that's what I would do. Anyway, great stuff, Andrew, and have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. Greatly appreciated.